And we are live. All right, guys. Night number one of the 2021 is 2021 NFL Draft. Browns selected at number 26 tonight. And they made an interesting choice, I thought, in choosing cornerback Greg Newsome II out of Northwestern. First of all, what do you guys think of the pick?
Well, I thought that it was exactly what they wanted. I mean, the whole idea that the Browns didn't have any needs was totally false. I mean, this is a loaded roster. This is a very talented roster, but cornerback was glaring. I mean, if you look at the situation there, you have Denzel Ward, an established Pro Bowl caliber player who misses a few games a year. Greedy Williams didn't play at all last year with the nerve injury, the nerve damage in the shoulder. So they signed Troy Hill, who can play inside or outside, but plan A is to use him at nickel. So unless they're sure about Greedy being able to make this comeback 100%, they don't have, heading into tonight, number two corner who, can start opposite Denzel Ward on the outside. That's what Greg Newsome was brought here to do. After the corners I mentioned, you have, Robert Jackson and MJ Stewart. They needed a corner. They went out and they got one. There was four who kind of formed that top tier. If you listen to the Daniel Jeremiahs and Dane Bruglers of the world, the draft analysts, and the Browns, they were able to stick there at 26 and pick. And they got one of the corners and a guy who I thought all along made a ton of sense and fit the profile for what they needed.
Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, cornerback is Nate. The more I looked at it tonight, I realized more so after studying it now that they added a cornerback, how much they really do need one. My thought always goes back to when Chris Spielman was new to the Browns. He would park back in his corner and philosophize on what made a good football team. One of the things that Chris, of course, we know each other going back to high school, so we would have our conversations, but he always tried to educate me on the importance of cornerbacks. He said time after time, you cannot have enough good cornerbacks. So there's that. And the fact that the Browns only have one good cornerback, Denzel Ward, pending the other guys, awaited chance to prove themselves is really kind of frightening. But in terms of getting this particular cornerback, when you go all the way down to that part of the draft and you're trying to get a starter at that point of the draft, you're going to have some flaws. The 26th pick, I just looked this up tonight after they drafted him. 5 number 26 picks in a row were pretty much busts. One of them was Tack McKinley, of course, is with the Browns now, but he was a bust for the team that drafted him. There were 5 in a row. We just didn't come anywhere close to giving the teams from the number 26 spot in the draft, though, what they wanted. So you're going to have problems, and the problem the Browns have brought upon themselves is the fact they have an off-injured cornerback who I think never played more than 8 games at Michigan. Michigan, but he played only 8 games at Northwestern in his busiest year, and only 3 last year. Now, of course, Stefanski and Barry were asked about that in the Zoom tonight, and they brushed it off, as you would expect. They wouldn't have drafted him if they didn't think that he was healthy enough to have a good chance to play. But that's a real issue. He only played a handful of games as an 18-year-old freshman at Northwestern, and then 8 games as a sophomore, and only 3 games last year. So that's a concern. Everything else about a scouting report checks out, but that's a big one not to check out, that injury thing.
Yeah, I just have to wonder how much of a pass he gets for the COVID year. Now, I've said when it comes to dealing with college football in general that everybody should get a freaking mulligan for last year. that was a disaster across the NCAA, and you got to wonder how much that plays into his situation. I forget the Big Ten. What most teams got in 6 games? Was it 6 games? I'm not sure.
So here's what happened. He actually missed 3 games last year. It was a shortened season, but he actually missed 3 games and he played 6. And it was a groin injury. And then 2019 he missed 3 games, and then 2018 he missed 8 games. But he explained on his conference call today that he had an ankle injury that really cost him like 3 games, and then he thought he was going to redshirt, so he sat out additional games. I think it's fair to say that he's kind of similar to Denzel Ward if you look at this track record of missing about 3 games a season. So yeah, that you're right, Steve. That is the knock against him. But other than that, like you said, it does check out. Like I was on the Pro Day Zoom with Drake on March 9th. And Pat Fitzgerald, Northwestern's coach. And Fitzgerald called him a unicorn and said he's a high-level corner with 0 off-field baggage. He's a great teammate. He's a captain type guy. I think, the injuries, yeah, that scares you a little bit. And that's probably why you're able to stick and pick at 26. I thought he was the guy. But I honestly thought that they probably would have to move up a little bit to get him because I thought the run on corners was going to be a little bit stronger than it was. But lo and behold, Andrew Berry looks really smart for not having to give up any draft capital and still getting his guy. But I do agree with you, Steve. I think the injuries are why he was available.
That's the part I like best, Nate, that they didn't have to give up assets to trade up and got a guy who was as good as they were going to get at 26. I'll just throw in there. I mean, the parts that check out, 6 foot, 190, real nice size. His pre-draft 40 was in the 4.3s. One thing I noticed, he's must be a pretty strong guy because they had 18 benches of 225, which is good for a cornerback, and they had a 40-inch vertical. So that kind of stuff checks out. And of course, obviously, Barry was going to do a strong job selling him tonight, and they did that. Both Barry and Stefanski kind of represented him as a guy touching on what you just said, Nate, is with 0 defects when he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who I think is like it's no coincidence he's a Browns pick. He's like an analytics darling. I mean, Barry mentioned a couple times his age. He's 20, and he said he's 10 or 15 youngest players in this draft class. And then if you look at some of the statistics, last year he had the lowest passer rating allowed on balls thrown into his coverage. The things that Pro Football Focus track, he scores really well in. Also, not allowing a touchdown last season. The thing that one kind of thing, if you're going to nitpick aside from injuries, is the interception ratio wasn't great. And the 25 passes defense he had in his 21 college games, he only had 1 interception. So you obviously, the Browns emphasize takeaways so much. You want to see him actually cash in on some of those opportunities. So I'm sure Joe Woods is going to be all over him for that. About that.
Yeah, I brought that up with Barry, and he said Jalen Ramsey didn't have very many in his college career, and I checked that out. He only had 3 in 41 games as a collegian, so but he's only got 11 in the NFL, and but that guy's a 4-time Pro Bowler. So if Newsome turns out to be anywhere near this, they're fine. But I agree with you, Nate. They had to address this, and you got the best guy available of the 4, of the elite cornerbacks there. So, I think this is what they had to do. I mean, my biggest concern is I still want a game-changing defender, and I still don't know who that is if he's on this defense, except for Miles. So I wanted another one. And maybe tomorrow, if they want to trade up for some of those big name rushers or linebacker, the Notre Dame linebacker still on the board. I mean, that's a possible. They have the capital.
What's this say to keep your butt on the field? I mean, his injury last year seems to have been such a freak kind of injury. I've had a pinched nerve from carrying luggage. Obviously, I'm not in his athletic elite level, so I know how much that hurts. And it kept me in a chair for a summer. So, what are they saying to him? Are they saying anything to him?
Sure, they've said a lot to him, George, but I think the bottom line is unless they know they're taking somewhat of a risk. I thought it was somewhat candid of Barry to admit tonight that, yeah, he's been banged up, but the context was that, and these were actually the exact words he used. He said he's only 20 years old, he's growing into his body, but that was one thing. But I'd have a hard time imagining that the people with a sense of Barry and his cohort Stefanski, both very sensible guys, they wouldn't take this kind of a plunge unless they thought they were going to win the gamble and that he's going to be on the field this year.
I was like I said, I was more interested in Greedy. What's it mean to Greedy?
Well, I mean, what do you want? I mean, the guy has a major nerve injury in the shoulder. He couldn't play it all last season.
I'm just asking a question. I mean,
I can't. I don't know. I don't know what the question is. They can't tell him make your nerve get better. I mean, this is something that's unpredictable. They're bullish on his comeback attempt. They think that he can get back on the field, but it's a nerve that cost him an entire season. So if you really want to bet on that he's going to be able to come back, you're crazy, and they confirm that by making this first-round pick tonight.
Well, the other thing is, George, is what if he gets hit in that spot again? It could be career-threatening. So you had to have, you see what I mean.
But for forgetting about whether he gets hit in that spot, even, Marla, which is a valid point, but even if that spot is just fine, let's do the math. I think he was a 46, drafted by a different regime, and the guy coming in is a 26, drafted by the new regime. And the 46 had a reputation for not liking to hit people. And this guy, I'll go back to the, he benches 225 pounds 18 times. He must be a pretty tough cat who keeps himself in shape. He seems to check out as a run defender. So what it means to Greedy to me is fairly easy, George. He is now number 3 at best on the depth chart.
There's a name that we need to mention that we haven't. Terence Mitchell. He started every game for the Browns last season, played the most defensive snaps, and that door was open for him partly because of Greedy's injury. Now, in training before Greedy got hurt, I was thinking Terence Mitchell might just win that job, without any injury. And that really kind of goes to Steve's point that, Greedy just wasn't proven. He was drafted by another regime, and I understand Terence Mitchell was a John Dorsey guy too, but I thought that was going to be a very good competition. Well, lo and behold, Terence Mitchell ended up being like the most reliable defender. I mean, he was there on the field more than anybody, all 18 games, including the 2 playoff games. Let him leave. He signed with Houston. So that just kind of adds to the conversation. We're talking about Greedy, but who walked out the door and all the snaps that he had under his belt. So, yeah, this was a big-time need. And it's so funny because, we talked to Andrew Barry, and Andrew Barry, I think, isn't like a smoke screen GM. Like he doesn't really strike me as somebody who is like way into that and trying to send mixed signals and everything. But anytime a GM downplays the idea that there just are certain positions of need and you want to address them, I think it's pretty funny because you can always say best available, but you had something that you needed to get done. Just like last year, you needed to get a left tackle. They put Jedrick Wills. Now I understand that was number 10 overall, a lot different than number 26. So, they had to have things fall their way to get the corner tonight, but they did. It was a very targeted approach, and they filled a big need on a team with very few needs.
Another question. How much could this help the pass rush and Myles Garrett in particular? Because there were a lot of instances last season when Garrett was just a second away from a sack, and the quarterback got the ball out of his hand when a receiver popped free. How much does this possibly help that pass rush?
I would say if you've got Ward and Newsome on the field together with the new guys you brought in from the Rams as well, I'd say he should have a little half a second longer to get there. You would two cover guys like this.
I think we haven't mentioned him yet. Marlon A. George, I don't know where you come down on Clowney, other than the guess, but where I come down on Clowney is he's really, really, really important. And I'm not minimizing the fact that he's been a semi-bust relative to generational talent, which he was supposed to have as a number 1 overall pick. But I really think they studied the acquisition of Clowney very, very thoroughly. And they did not let go Sheldon Richardson lightly. But they thought so much of Clowney, and I guess they humored me. I think more of him now than I did before because they think that much of him. But they thought so much of Clowney that they let go a really big asset. Granted, they could bring him back. I don't know. Sheldon doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who's going to play ball there and come back. But Clowney to me is super important, and that aspect of the pass rush helping Myles Garrett in addition to better coverage. Yeah, it's we all know that you cover longer, you have more time to rush the pass, and theoretically with the upgrades at safety and now a corner, they're going to cover maybe not just longer, but way longer. And with Clowney on the field. I don't know. I think the chemistry's coming together, but they really do need to replace Sheldon Richardson, don't they?
They do. I kind of want to end this here with thoughts on round 2. And the reason why I believe this is a segue is there were no defensive tackles taken tonight. So you got your top 2, and Christian Barmore from Alabama and Levi Onwuzurike from Washington. I think that's interesting. I didn't buy Christian Barmore to the Browns at 26. That was being tossed around a little bit. But, if he's there in the second round and he starts sliding a little bit, or Onwuzurike, maybe the Browns like him better. I know Daniel Jeremiah prefers him over Barmore. But if one of those guys is there, I think that you could see Andrew Berry not just sit there at 59, but maybe even move up. And, I mean, there's a number of players. I just think that the Browns, with the 2 third-round picks and the 2 fourth-round picks, I could see a move up tomorrow night. Could have seen a move up tonight. In fact, I mentioned it earlier that I thought that it was going to be for Newsome if they went with that strategy. Well, I think they could very well move up tomorrow night. And I mean, there's a lot of ways to go. Rondale Moore has been a fascination of mine for a long time. I think that there's a role for him already built into the playbook. It's exactly what they tried to do last year with JoJo Natson. I mean, out there at training camp, JoJo Natson was running jet sweeps, end arounds, bubble screens a lot with the ones. We barely got to see it in the regular season. They tried to get him going a little bit. Obviously, he tore his ACL in game 3. Now, Rondale Moore is like a super version of JoJo Natson. And JoJo Natson obviously has great speed. And, George, from University of Akron, there's things to like, and Mike Prefer certainly does. But Rondale Moore is like that, like a superhero version of it. And they're both 5'7", so that's why Rondale Moore is in the second round, despite his athleticism. I mean, you guys remember 3 years ago what he against Ohio State. I mean, this. So I think he's another guy to watch in round 2. Does anybody else have round 2 people?
I've looked at the round 2. I know one of my assignments tonight, Nate, was to do the leftovers list of who's available, and without singling out any names, because I know the ones I might name aren't going to be the ones that Stefanski and Barry mutually have definitely targeted. But there are players there at defensive tackle, at linebacker, at edge, and at wide receiver, and any of which, maybe edge being the least of those, but it's kind of loaded with positions the Browns need, and you just know that they're going to be targeting somebody. And Nate, I will bet you a cyber cappuccino that they will be trading up from 59 to get the player they target.
Well, I agree. I mean, I lean that way. I mean,
yeah, you said you're thinking that way, and I'm not. I'm just not just thinking that way. I'm really counting on it. I'll be surprised if they don't.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet, because I think so too. Like I think percentage is greater than 50 that they do, because I just don't think that they, with those extra picks in the 3rd and 4th round, are just going to sit there. And I'm looking at these names. I'm looking at a best list. I mean, you're right, Steve. I mean, there are a bunch of guys we wrote about in the lead up that we thought could be 26 possibilities. I mean, Owusu Koromoa, George talked to him at Pro Day. Aziz Ojulari.
There's another good name.
There's a lot of guys.
But Nate, Marla said earlier that defense was kind of a focal point for her. She was president of this thing, and I guess I kind of think that they probably will, because there are so many players left. Probably will take a defensive player, and probably should. One reason I think that is there was this big run on pass catchers. That first round was kind of amazing how the tight end and the wideouts went bang, bang, bang right up there where the quarterbacks were supposed to go. And then that kind of followed through into the first round. But I think the Browns are going to have to count on the thoughts like, well, Beckham's going to have to come back, and the other guys are, everything else is going to have to fall in place, and that their draft pick this year, so to speak, is going to be somebody like Donovan Peoples-Jones. They'll have to get something out of somebody like Peoples-Jones from last year's draft, and that's not a bad bet, by the way. I kind of like him, but I really do see them targeting a defensive player in that second round.
I can't go either way, because
when you look at that list, could you see them? Yeah. My question is, when you look at that list of who all's there, you could almost see them trading up for a couple of those guys.
I mean, Moore. That guy. I mean, I was talking about Rondale Moore earlier, but Elijah Moore, he led the SEC and catches and yards per game, and I mean, he played for Lane Kiffin. I was on the Pro Day Zoom with him too, and let's not forget that his brother is Browns defensive line coach Chris Kiffin. So the Browns are going to know as much about him as anyone. I think he's really interesting too. I can't imagine being a 59. He was one of those fringe first round guys. So I don't know, Steve. I agree with you more about the trade up than I do about defensive player. I think it could be a receiver here.
Nate, I love the guy you're talking about, the little guy. I mean, to me, he's like a pinto horse of a unicorn. But he's got stuff, speed. I think he had a 42.5 inch vertical. But you would love to have him. I guess I'm betting defense, and I certainly would not object to what at all if they would add a dynamic piece of the offense like that. So.
I think it
tells me they're leaning to defense. One, Nate and Marlo, not to belabor this, but one thing you both heard Stefanski say tonight was that we still want help at all three levels of the defense. So the little nugget of a teaser hint that Kevin threw out was angled toward the defense. So I just have half a notion that they're leaning that way as much as they'd like to have help for offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see when this is all said and done. I do think we're going to see edge, defensive tackle, and linebacker added to the mix here. I do think receiver will be there. It's just a matter of when. But yeah, I think it's kind of succession planning with Beckham and Landry. They're going to combine for more than $31 million of salary cap space next year. They're already over 30 combined, and the Browns can afford it right now. What happens when you put the upcoming extensions on the books? Then it becomes more difficult, and that's why I think you're going to have a receiver of the future on a rookie contract. So I could see them starting that as early as tomorrow night.
Trading those two first-round picks or the two third-round picks and moving up could possibly get you the best of both worlds is one thought I have, Nate, on that.
Well, if they traded both third-round picks, that would be a big, bold move up to the top. They would be picking early in the second round. And,
I mean, maybe even keep your 59 and do something with those two third-rounders. I don't know what, but, they do have – that is an attractive set of ammo to have, those two third-rounders.
Sure. I think we'll see them spin some picks forward, too. I think they're going to pick fewer than 9 players. I think they're going to try to do, especially in day 3, the Joe Banner 2013 method of, I'm going to trade a 4th this year for a 3rd next year, a 5th this year for a 4th next year, because I don't think that they pick 9 players. Getting the 9 rookies on the team, with the makeup of the roster would be difficult. And that's that analytics move of spinning it forward, improving, your stock, but just the next year. And I really do buy that the medical information is just not what it usually is this year. So I could see them trying to kind of parlay some of these picks in next year. So we'll see. I also have this theory that they're maybe pick an injured player to kind of stash him on IR. So we'll see. These are some kind of different creative strategies that you could use to get fewer than 9 if you don't think that you're going to have for 9.
All right, guys. It's time for some of us to go to bed.
Yeah.
So we'll see everybody tomorrow. For Nate Ulrich, Steve Dorshak, Marla Ridenauer, and myself, good night. Good morning. Get your lucky charms. I got mine. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Good night.